Everything you know about the Western world, our philosophy, our democracy, our myths, was built on a foundation of war. From the epic battles of Achilles to the legions of Rome, our history is a story written in bronze and iron, a story of conflict, conquest, and the warrior ideal. But what if that foundation is a lie? What if the world we inherited is just a dark reflection of a future that was stolen from us? A future architected not by warriors, but by artists and sailors. To find that stolen future, we have to travel back in time, over 3,500 years ago, to the sun-drenched island of Crete in the Aegean Sea. Here, Europe's first great civilization flourished, the Minoans. And they were different. While other cultures were building massive fortifications, the Minoans built sprawling open-air palaces like Knossos, vibrant labyrinths of art, commerce, and culture. They didn't have walls. Think about that. Their security wasn't in stone, it was in the sea. They were masters of trade, their ships carrying saffron, pottery, and ideas across the entire Mediterranean. Their frescoes depict a joyful people leaping over bulls, dancing in sacred groves, and celebrating nature. Their religion was centered not on a wrathful sky father, but on a powerful earth mother, a snake goddess of life and regeneration. They had advanced plumbing, a written language we still can't fully decipher, and an artistic flair that was centuries ahead of its time. This wasn't a prelude to the West. This was a completely different path. And then they vanished. The vibrant culture that dominated the Aegean for 1,000 years just disappears from the historical record. It's one of the greatest cold cases in all of history. And for decades, there have been two prime suspects. Suspect number one, a force of nature. About 100 kilometers north of Crete, the island of Thera, what we now call Santorini, was home to one of the most violent volcanic eruptions in human history. It exploded with the force of hundreds of atomic bombs, triggering colossal tsunamis that would have scoured the northern coast of Crete, while a cloud of choking ash blanketed the island, poisoning crops and plunging the world into a volcanic winter. It was a cataclysm, an apocalypse, an act of God that could have wiped the Minoans from the map. But there's another, more sinister possibility. Suspect number two, a brutal invasion. On the mainland of Greece, a new power was rising. The Mycenaeans. If the Minoans were artists and sailors, the Mycenaeans were warriors, through and through. They lived in heavily fortified hilltop citadels. They buried their kings with golden death masks and bronze swords, and their stories are of rage, glory, and bloodshed. Archaeological evidence shows that in the final years of the Minoan civilization, Mycenaean weapons, pottery, and administrative practices start to appear on Crete. Was it a gradual takeover, or a swift, bloody conquest that snuffed out the Minoan light and replaced it with a culture of the sword? For centuries, that's where the story ended. A beautiful civilization lost to either fire or steel. And from the ashes rose the Mycenaeans, whose myths of war and heroic conflict would shape the Greeks, then the Romans, and ultimately us. But what if we could reopen the case? What if we could propose an alternate timeline? Imagine this. The Thera eruption happens. It's devastating. The Minoan fleet is crippled, their coastal towns washed away. But they are a resilient people, a network of island communities. They endure. The Mycenaeans on the mainland, also weakened by the climate chaos, see an opportunity. But instead of a swift conquest, they find a civilization that bends but doesn't break. Over generations, what happens isn't a conquest, it's a merger. The warlike Mycenaeans are gradually absorbed into the wealthier, more sophisticated, and more extensive Minoan trade network. Minoan culture becomes the dominant force. This is our great divergence, the moment history splits, and the ripple effects are staggering. First, there is no Greek Dark Age. The collapse of the Mycenaean palace culture, which plunged the region into centuries of illiteracy and decline, never happens. Civilization has an unbroken, continuous line of development from the Bronze Age onward. Imagine the scientific and cultural progress, building on a Minoan foundation for an extra 400 years. Then, think of our philosophy. So much of Western thought is based on conflict and dualism. Plato's world of perfect forms versus our flawed reality. The Socratic method, a form of intellectual combat. Aristotle's logic, designed to win arguments. What would a philosophy born from Minoan values look like? Perhaps one of balance instead of conflict. A worldview that sees humanity not as separate from nature, but as part of its cyclical dance. A logic of harmony and connection, not opposition. And our religion. Imagine a Western world where the primary divine figure isn't a thunder-hurling patriarch like Zeus, but a life-giving Earth Mother. A world where the most sacred stories aren't about the wars of men, but about the cycles of nature. How would that change our view of the environment, of gender, of power itself? Finally, the very concept of empire is transformed. Instead of the Roman model, the legion, the road, the sword, military subjugation, the Minoan model prevails. An empire built not on conquering lands, but on connecting ports. A thalassocracy, a sea power, held together by trade, alliance, and mutual benefit. Its symbol isn't the eagle, it's the ship, a network of influence, not an iron fist of control. A West built on commerce and cooperation, not conquest. We live in the world the Mycenaeans made, the world of Achilles' rage and Odysseus' cunning. But in the ghost of Minoan Crete, we can see the shadow of another world. A world of balance, of art, of the sea. A future that was stolen before it had a chance to bloom. What are your theories on how a Minoan-dominated world would have unfolded? Would it have been a utopia, or would it have faced its own unique downfall? Share your thoughts, and if you enjoyed this journey, consider subscribing for more explorations into history's greatest what-ifs.